Hello and welcome back to the Soccerspective YouTube channel. With the January transfer window all wrapped up, Premier League clubs spending a total of 70 million, down 120 million from the 2020 January transfer window, which saw Bruno Fernandes move to Manchester United. We're going to be taking a look at each club's activity during the window and ranking them in terms of how they're going to fare for the season going forward. In 20th position, we have Sheffield United. For a team that are currently sat bottom of the league, having won 2 games all season and amassing 8 points so far at the halfway stage, you'd have expected the bottom club to do a bit more activity in the transfer window. But the Blades failed to sign anyone. There's 3 outgoings, all of them youth team players looking to gain first team experience, and this leaves Sheffield in a honestly quite woeful position looking ahead to the second half of the season. The squad obviously isn't good enough to compete at this level anymore, with the 20 million they signed Ryan Brewster for in the summer obviously not being repaid in goals. So it's a bit of a worrying time for Sheffield United fans. You'd expect them to bring in some firepower, especially with the long-term injury to Sander Berge, one of their best players for the first half of the season. So I honestly don't know where Sheffield go from here. I'd expected personally them to bring in a centre mid, especially with Lundstrom's contract expiring and him wanting out. But there's no real enthusiasm from Sheffield to stay up. It's almost like they've accepted relegation at this point. So yeah, not the most exciting January transfer window for Sheffield United fans, who saw 3 outgoings and no one coming into the club. In 19th position, we have Chelsea. So Thomas Tuchel has come in at an awkward time because he's come halfway through the January transfer window, which means he hasn't had time to build the squad to the way he had liked. There are obviously some exciting players in there, but they haven't performed as of late. Timo Werner, Kai Havertz just haven't been performing at the level you'd have expected them to given their fee. But the reason I rank Chelsea so lowly in this transfer window is the loaning of Fikayo Tomori with an option to buy to AC Milan. You have Rudiger and Christensen ahead of him at the club who have not performed for years. It's amazing to me that Rudiger's got back into the team, especially ahead of the informed Kurt Zouma, and to loan out one of the most promising young centre-backs who had a very good year last year in the Prem, and an even better year on loan at Derby under Frank Lampard, which is why he boosted him into the first team. It's amazing to me that they've let him go for such a cheap price, and Chelsea have a history of doing this. They did it to Mo Salah, Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, and I think this might be another one that's got away for them. Danny Drinkwater off the wage bill is good for another 6 months, but again, he's still there. He's still a Chelsea player, and the 40 million they paid for him that season has not been recouped in the slightest. So I do sympathise with Chelsea for a little bit. Thomas Tuchel hasn't had his time to build the squad that he wants, but the loaning of Fikayo Tomori admittedly came under Frank Lampard, but it's another one to me that got away for Chelsea. In 18th, we have Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham's biggest flaw in the transfer window comes from not their lack of signings, but their lack of outgoings. They've had a lot of youth players move out on loan, such as White and Clark, to build first-team experience, though both of them played in the FA Cup match against Maine. But Dele Alli is still at the club, and he has not played as much as someone of his calibre should be under Jose Mourinho. And whilst he has quite a hefty wage and is a very talented player who will be want to playing first-team football, he didn't go because they couldn't bring in a replacement. They were looking at Christian Eriksen or Papu Gomez for the entire window, but they couldn't get the deal across the line, which means they've got an out of favour, an out of form, and honestly a restless Dele Alli still at the club, racking up a hefty wage, not getting him in it. I don't know why Jose Mourinho doesn't play him. There's obviously some, you'd think there's some backstage drama going on there, because Ali is a recognised Premier League player. But yeah, for him to stay at the club, probably against his will, and have a player of that calibre sitting on the bench is a big mistake for Tottenham. You either play him or let him go. In 17th, we have Manchester City. Now, in my opinion, Manchester City have the most complete squad in the league. I don't think there's a position they lack quality in, and even depth. But the one thing that's been troubling them all season is having an informed striker. Sergio Aguero has missed a large part of the season through injury, self-isolation, and then catching coronavirus himself. And Gabriel Jesus, though being injured, hasn't seen the same form that he's had in the previous years. So I think a recognised striker they could have done with bringing in this transfer window. No major outgoings, but none of their players was necessarily being looked at. There's no one restless at the club. There's no one that needed an outlet. So it's a pretty harmless transfer window for Man City, and you find that with a lot of clubs in the January transfer window. I think the most important thing for Premier League clubs this year is not letting go of anyone. But yeah, I'd have personally brought in a striker to deputise Aguero and Jesus, considering the lack of form they've been in this season. You've had De Bruyne playing up there, you've had Sterling, you've had Torres, Mahrez, and even Foden deputising as a striker. So Manchester City, a harmless window, no one of notice leaving apart from a few youth team players out on loan, but no major marquee signings, which is what you come to expect under Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. In 16th place is Leeds. Just as with Manchester City, Leeds United have had a fairly uneventful transfer window, apart from sending some young players out on loan to build a bit of first team experience. There was no major outgoing for Leeds United, which is impressive for them considering the form of some of their players, most notably Patrick Bamford, Rafinha, Luke Ayling, Jack Harrison. You've got some exciting young players there who would probably start for a bunch of Premier League clubs, but they've managed to tie them down and keep them at the club. And honestly, I don't think they need to bring anyone in. It would be a case of buying for the sake of buying. There's no position that Leeds look weak in, and you could argue that the defence is probably one of the worst in the league, but that's just the style of football they play. There's no argument to suggest that these Leeds players are bad defenders, but it's the style that Bielsa plays, that they all rush forward and they press together as a team. So they're going to concede a bunch of goals. So again, an uneventful transfer window for Leeds, just as with Manchester City and just as with the team coming up. But I think that's what Leeds fans expected, and honestly, they can probably be happy with that. In 15th, we have Leicester City. Just as with Leeds and Manchester City, Leicester didn't bring in anyone, and for a team as in form as them, and players that are probably playing above expectation, you don't need anyone. The only thing I would have probably thought about doing, just as with Manchester City, is a bit of cover for Jamie Vardy, but he gets injured very rarely, and when he does, he's not out for long. And Kelechi Iheanacho and even Harvey Barnes at striker are more than adequate replacements. The one flaw I'd have with the Leicester City transfer window is getting rid of Damari Gray for so cheap. He was a player that never really reached his potential after they signed him from Birmingham, but he isn't needed. You've got Mark Albrighton, you've got James Maddison, you've got Harvey Barnes, you've got Under, who's coming into form this season, and there's no point for a player as promising as that to be sitting on the bench. Slimani off the wage bill is a big plus for them. A striker that hasn't really found his form in the last few years. So to shift him, despite probably needing a replacement striker, is good for them. And yeah, just another uneventful transfer window. And you've seen that quite a lot this season. It's just about getting youth players out on loan and building experience and just trying to hold on to your better players. And with such a young squad that Leicester have, that's the best that they could have hoped for. In 14th are the champions, Liverpool. Now, I had Liverpool 20th on my list for so long, because of their failure to bring in a centre-back for the entire January transfer window. But the season-ending injury to Joel Matip obviously pushed the hand of the owners. And so they brought in two centre-backs. They brought in Ben Davies from Preston and Kabak from Schalke. Now, this Kabak has a lot of hype around him from previous years, but he plays in a Schalke team that's conceded 40-odd goals this season and sit bottom of the Bundesliga. So there's no certainty that he's actually going to be any good. But it's a step up for Henderson, which allows him to move back into centre mid, and he's crucial to the way that Liverpool play. He merges the defence and the attack and just provides that outlet to go forward. I think sending Minamino out on loan to Southampton is a weird one for me, because I liked him when he played. I thought he was an exciting young talent, and Divock Origi, who is their sort of deputising attacking player, does not provide much, and you could see that from their latest win at the weekend. So yeah, to me that was an odd one because Liverpool fans are pawning for him to start. But yeah, a mixed transfer window for Liverpool. You'd have expected them to bring in someone a lot more high quality like Eder Militao, who was available from Real Madrid. But they got their two centre-backs, which they desperately needed. So Liverpool fans can't complain too much. But yeah, I think the champions of England could have looked a bit higher than a Preston North End centre-back and a centre-back to the worst team in the Bundesliga. In 13th place, we have Fulham. Fulham have been a sort of mixed bag this season. They started the season with some very poor performances, and Paddy Power had already paid out bets for Fulham to go down. So you could see what people thought Fulham were going to be like this season, but they've turned it around in the last few weeks under Scott Parker. And I think they've got a promising young side, but I think they just needed to kick on a little bit more in the January transfer window in order to ensure they stay up. They signed Josh Meyer from Bordeaux, who had recently played at Sunderland. So he's played in English football before, so he has that history. but I'd have expected a little bit more. They kept Loftus-Cheek, which is good for them because he's becoming one of their most important players, and they kept hold of someone like Lookman, who's been their most exciting talent, and Anguissa. But the decision to extend the loan of Anthony Knockaert to Nottingham Forest was surprising to me, because Knockaert's been one of the best players in the Championship this season and one of the best players for Forest. And admittedly, he's never really stepped up to the Premier League level, but people know how talented he is from his time at Brighton and Leicester. So Fulham, not a bad transfer window, but given their recent spending history in the past few years, spending over 100 million last time they got promoted, I'd expected a little bit more from them. In 12th place, we have Burnley. So Burnley only managed to bring in 2 players this transfer window, both exciting youngsters who moved straight into their 23 squad. So you've got Ben Ward from Hastings, a non-league club, but it's good to see Premier League clubs investing into non-league, and Anthony Gomez Mancini from Angers, who, moves in straight into their 23s, but exciting young players that could potentially make an impact in the future. As for Burnley, they tied a bunch of key players down to extended contracts. You've got the likes of Matt Lowton, Goodmanson, Ben Mee. So that's good for the squad that have been sort of a kept bunch for the last few years. I think the importance of Nick Pope does not go unnoticed for Burnley. And the fact that he hasn't been swept up by another club yet, someone like Everton with their out-of-form Jordan Pickford, I think it's big for him that he stayed this transfer window. But again, a sort of uneventful transfer window for Burnley, but one that they could be thankful for, that they haven't got rid of the likes of Pope and Dwight McNeil. And I think they've got a decent squad for the style of football that Sean Dyche likes to play. And I think on their day, they're almost impossible to get past. You saw that they beat Liverpool for the first time at home in 3-4 years. So Burnley have got potential to kick on this second half of the season, and I don't think they needed to bring in anyone, but I think it was important they kept their better players. In 11th place, we have Southampton. Now, Southampton only brought in 1 player this transfer window, Minamino from Liverpool, who has flashes of brilliance for the Premier League champions in his time at Anfield, but not enough to kick on and push for that European place that they'll probably be hoping for. But I think the important thing for Southampton is, like most of the clubs this season, they haven't got rid of their bigger players. Danny Ings has been rumoured to been the source of a bunch of transfer speculation with his bid to play in the Champions League. And obviously Hassan Hutter has come out and said that he should be doing this for Southampton, but to keep him for another 6 months is very good for the club. The likes of James Ward-Prowse having a very good season probably could have attracted interest from a bunch of bigger clubs, but stayed loyal to Southampton. The one concern I'd have for the club is the loaning of Jan Valery when they have Kyle Walker-Peters and Ryan Bertrand both out injured. Their fullback is not the strongest position as it is, and with 2 injuries and Valery going out on loan, it's even weaker. But Hassan Hutter wouldn't have sent Valery out on loan if they didn't already have a plan. So again, a fairly mundane transfer window for Southampton, but it'll be interesting to see how Minamino kicks on with a bunch more minutes at the club. In 10th place, we have Crystal Palace. What more needs to be said about Crystal Palace's transfer window, apart from the fact they've kept Wilfried Zaha for another 6 months? And I think that's what Crystal Palace fans hope for every time January and the summer comes around. The fact that their talisman will be there for another season. But on top of that, they've actually had a very good window. I think the biggest thing for them is getting the failed wonder kid Max Meyer off their wage bill. And there was a lot of hype around him when he moved to the Premier League. And it was a coup for Palace that they got him from Schalke. But he never kicked on. He never found that form that made him one of the most highly regarded youngsters in the world from his time in Germany. So they signed him on a very big wage, but a free transfer. To shift that wage for 6 months is very good for them. They signed the exciting young striker Matata, who I imagine will go straight into their team for the weekend. And they've got actually quite a good arsenal of strikers. They've got Benteke, who on his day is a real handful. Batshuayi, who has bounced around these sort of low-knee clubs, but has always performed. Jordan Ayew, very good player on his day. And then Zaha can obviously fill in. And I think the extension of the contract for Nathaniel Klein, though older than most of the signings that you'll see clubs make in this transfer window, is very good for them because they have 2 very young fullbacks in Mitchell and Ferguson and an out-of-form Patrick Van Arnholt. So for someone to cement that right-back position as their own is very good for them. So I would say this is a very positive transfer window for Crystal Palace. And I personally don't think they put a foot wrong. In 9th place, we have Aston Villa. Now, I think Aston Villa have one of the most exciting young squads in the league at the moment. I think they have a real shot of kicking on for Europa League football and potentially even Champions League football. And the one signing they've made this transfer window certainly boosts their hopes of that. They brought in Morgan Sanson from Marseille, who has established history playing at Europa League and Champions League level, and is certainly an upgrade on the already very good Conor Hourihane, who has gone on loan to Swansea. But just as with Crystal Palace before, the biggest thing for them is keeping Jack Grealish. He's going to have so many suitors for his signature in the summer, and I think he believes there is something very special going on in the club, and he's certainly right. Sanson, it'll be interesting to see if he has the biggest impact as the summer signings. Ollie Watkins turning out to be a very good striker for Aston Villa, and also did it his time at Brentford, but no one bigger than Emiliano Martinez, who was vying for a transfer for Arsenal after not getting the number 1 shirt, and he has shown them why he should have stayed. He has been phenomenal. Second most clean sheets of the league, only behind Ederson, and Villa have a very exciting squad, and they've only gone and made that a little bit better by signing Sanson this summer. In 8th place, we have Manchester United. There's always a lot of talk when Manchester United step up in the transfer window about who they're going to sign and what big name marquee signing they're going to make. It's always rumoured the likes of Jadon Sancho, Erling Haaland, and to be fair, they brought in Edison Cavani in the summer, who has proved to be a very good striker for them. But the signing of Ahmed Diallo, who finally got his work permit and finally moved to Manchester, is big for them. Their wingers have been the most sporadic in the Premier League this season. None of them have really kicked on and found form. Rashford has been very good, but recently has dropped off. Martial is incredibly inconsistent, and Greenwood is not the same youngster that emerged in the team last season. So Diallo goes into the under-23 squad. He's already scored 2 goals in his first game against Liverpool, so hopefully he can kick on and make the others better. In terms of outgoings, they shifted Jesse Lingard off their wage bill after being one of the longest servants of the club, and he can be proud of his time there. He won them the FA Cup, the Europa League, the Community Shield. A very good player for Man United on his day, and West Ham have got a decent signing there. Marcus Rojo, who hasn't played this season barely at all, if at all, is off the wage bill, and Heath Chong is gone out on loan for another consecutive loan. So, yeah, a successful transfer window for Manchester United. Maybe not the big marquee signing they were hoping for, but one that should certainly improve the squad. In 7th, we have Newcastle. Only 3 bits of business for Newcastle in the January transfer window this year, but all could prove pivotal in their push for survival this season under Steve Bruce. They brought in Joe Willock from Arsenal, who has established himself in the Arsenal first team, or in and around, and has put in big performances in cup matches, in Europa League matches, and will only increase the quality of that Newcastle midfield. I think it's a very good loan signing. I think Willock needs that consistent game time in order to kick on and break into the Arsenal first team, and I think Newcastle need an established midfielder, especially in the attacking role, who can just feed balls into Callum Wilson and Alan St-Maximin, because the two of them are incredibly exciting. They've let go of Rolando Aarons to Huddersfield, who never really found form at the club, which was disappointing because in his time at England under-21s and sort of early on in his career, he was one of the most exciting prospects that English football had. And DeAndre Yedlin is gone. Now, him and Jamal Lewis at the start of the season were potentially one of the most exciting fullback partnerships, but Yedlin never really found form this season, and his move to Turkey should free up a bit of funds if in case they want to make signings in the summer. But a productive transfer window from Newcastle, and they've built quality on a position they pretty desperately needed. In 6th place, we have Everton. Everton's transfer window was fairly mundane, only bringing in a single player on transfer deadline day, but one that has established himself in the Premier League and can prove to be a very exciting talent. They brought in Josh King from Bournemouth for a cutthroat price of £5 million, and in my opinion that's a very good signing. King was very good at his time in Bournemouth, maybe not returning as much as he could have with Callum Wilson and partnering up front, but we saw glimpses of a player that can change a game, and partnering him with Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, which Ancelotti has said he's going to do, with Luka Dean and James Rodriguez whipping balls into the 3 of them, I think that boosts the Everton attack line indefinitely. Shifting Yannick Bolasie off the wage bill was very good because he's a player they signed with high hopes, and from his years at the club, he never really performed for them. He was always a player that was more flash and flair rather than end product, and I think in an Everton team which doesn't have that many sort of players, he brought something new, but never really returned as much as they were expecting to. So a productive transfer window from Everton, but maybe not the most exciting. In 5th place, we have Wolverhampton Wanderers. On the surface, the Wolves transfer window might not look that impressive, with only 1 incoming and a few youth team players going out on loan, but the importance of Raul Jimenez is definitely noticeable since his horrific head injury earlier in the season. They're yet to win a match in 2021, And I think they missed that target man up front for the likes of Neto and Podence and Traore to bounce off of. And Willian Jose from Real Sociedad is basically a like-for-like replacement for the Mexican. I think he'll do very well as the target man in the Wolves system that play five at the back and use the width incredibly well. Wolves haven't been the same team since they lost someone like Matt Doherty, and Johnny is a big injury for them, but he's coming back. And the decision to send Oscar Burr and Vinagre out on loan should only increase them as players. Wolves have a very good squad, and I think with a brand new target man and new players coming back off injury, I think it should be an exciting end of the season for them. In fourth place is West Ham. Now, this top four was incredibly difficult to pick because there's arguments for all of them having the best transfer window. But I've gone with West Ham in fourth. The signing of Ben Rama on a permanent is very good. He may not have been the same player he was at Brentford, but he hasn't had the time to adjust yet, only just breaking into the first team and getting a run of consecutive starts. So his second half of the season should be very exciting. I really like the signing of Jesse Lingard as a backup, or potentially even a starter. West Ham have a plethora of very exciting attacking options, and he's only made that even stronger. We've seen how good Jesse Lingard can be from his time at Man United, and I think with a bit more confidence under a manager that knows him from Moyes' time at United, I think he should kick on. I think they've got two very big players off their wage bill, most notably Sebastian Haller, who's moved to Ajax for a cutthroat price, but he wasn't the striker that West Ham hoped he would be. Robert Snodgrass off the wage bill as well. Again, a player that hasn't kicked on this season and hasn't recaptured the form that he found at someone like, let's say, Norwich or Hull. So, a very positive transfer window for West Ham. A team that are incredibly in form and one that will certainly look to break into the Europa League places if they keep up this form. In third place is Brighton and Hove Albion. Now, the Brighton transfer window for me, though they made one incredibly exciting signing, isn't third for the signings they brought in. It's for the players they managed to keep. And I think the biggest thing for them was signing Tariq Lamptey down to a brand new contract until 2025. Because Lamptey has been one of the most exciting players in the league when he's fit, and is definitely another one that got away for Chelsea. Also, Basuma in the middle of the park has got plenty of suitors. We even talk of Real Madrid coming in for him. So to keep him for another 6 months is incredibly important. They beat the likes of Manchester United and other big clubs for the signing of Casido in centre mid, who again is an incredibly exciting young player, and one that Brighton fans will be hoping that can reinvent their team. Him and Basuma in the middle are two very good players. In terms of outgoings, they got rid of out-of-form keeper Matt Ryan, who has been an honourable servant to the club, but isn't the keeper he was a few years ago. And I think shifting him off was a very good idea. Also, the likes of Bernardo, just, again, not playing in the first team. You don't need players like that around the club. So a very good transfer window from Brighton. The signing they made should look to be a very good one. But also, keeping hold of Basuma and Lamptey is going to send Graham Potter's team straight up the table for the second half of the season. In second place, we have West Brom. Now, if this video was for signings alone, West Brom will win it. They've brought in potentially the most exciting player in the January transfer window in Ainsley Maitland-Niles from Arsenal. Now, this is a player that is established in the first team and has some very big performances for the club under his belt, most recently in the FA Cup final. And the decision to send him out on loan from Arsenal was strange for me. Their fullback options aren't the greatest, with Cedric, Bellerin, Callum Chambers and Kieran Tierney currently out injured. You've got Saka that can sit in, but you'd want him going forward. So it's an absolute steal for West Brom and a player that should surely see them rise up the table. Also, Robert Snodgrass, an established Premier League winger, one that's played for the likes of Norwich, Hull, West Ham. He should only increase the club's chances of going up the table. In terms of outgoings, Charlie Austin off the wage bill, a striker that I'd love to see work at West Brom, but he didn't. And it's a shame, but he demands a high wage, and to shift him back out to QPR was a bit of genius from Big Sam, because he's not the most in-demand striker. You've also got Diagna signing for West Brom, an established striker who's played across the world, and Andy Lonergan from Liverpool, who can provide a bit of competition for Sam Johnson in net, who's already had a great season. West Brom have signed like a team that want to stay in the Premier League. It's Big Sam's specialty, and he's building a squad around him with the likes of Mateus Pereira, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Callum Robertson, and I'm very excited to see what West Brom can do in the second half of the season. And finally, in first place, we have Arsenal. Now, for years, Arsenal's problem have been keeping players on a massive wage at the club and not playing them. And finally, they've taken the plunge and got rid of some of their biggest players. most notably Mesut Ozil. I've always been a massive fan of Ozil, even when he was exiled from the Premier League squad. And to me, it's incredible that he didn't play in the last 10 or so games when they were missing that creative spark. But he's gone. His £400,000 a week wage is gone. And Arsenal fans can be both relieved and sad that one of the best servants of the club, one of their marquee signings time at the Emirates is over for now. In terms of incomings, Martin Odegaard is a great signing. I know it's only 6 months and I know there's no option to buy, but he can either kick Emil Smith-Rowe on because he's had a great few months, or start for them. There's a reason Real Madrid signed him at the age of 16, and his time at Real Sociedad last season probably showed that, and I hope that he can find some form because he's a very exciting player. They need Aubameyang back in form. I think that's very important for them, but hopefully Odegaard's the player that can do that. Matt Ryan, also, Runarsson has not performed this season. He had an absolute shambles in the one game he played this season, and Matt Ryan's an established Premier League keeper who can provide a bit of competition for Leno and deputise when needed. Socrates, Mustafi and Kolasinac off the wage bill. Surprisingly, 2 of them going to Schalke, so Arsenal fans who would be thanking them. Again, 2 big names off the wage bill. A clear out is what Arsenal needed, and in January 2021 they've finally done that, and that's why they're my top performing team in the January 2021 transfer window.